The following program has been rated TV-G, general audiences. Most parents would find this program suitable for all ages.
History repeats itself in an echoing cadence. A knowledge and a review of the past is as a messenger of the present and of the future. In Easton, at this very moment, there is an evocative duplication of the past. Oakes and Oliver Ames, brothers and entrepreneurs of national fame, are memorialized in the northeastern village. Together in death, Oakes and Oliver remain side by side in those Henry Hobson Richardson design monuments, the Oakes Ames Memorial Hall and the Oliver Ames Free Library. Those brothers have now long rested in their earthly cells, but their monuments, now into their second century, continue to fascinate and to impress. Now, much involved and dedicated to the appropriate restoration, the maintenance, and the services of these monuments are the two brothers, William and Fred Ames, they of the blood and lineage of Oakes and Oliver. William and Fred are the sons of David and Elizabeth Motley Ames. These younger Ames brothers, together with their mother Elizabeth, have graciously participated in the preparation of this edition of Easton's Portals.
Good morning. My name is Fred Ames, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Oakes Ames Memorial Hall, which is behind me. The hall was begun in 1880, and it was built by the children of Congressman Oakes Ames. Initial construction budget was $29,000, and the finished product came in at $60,000. So as you can see, some things remain the same. The reason for the hall was it to be used as a town office. That did not happen, and the building in its early days was largely unused. The exterior of the building has a light brown granite on the first level with brownstone arches and red brick used for the upper levels. Especially prominent is the tile roof, the red tile roof. The carvings are in brownstone, a soft brownstone, and are of the signs of the zodiac, natural figure, trees and flowers, and also a sundial. One prominent feature of the design of this building is the close collaboration the architect Richardson had with the famous landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted, who, as you know, did the rockery, which is directly behind the viewer. When you look at the site, you can see the dramatic staircase, how it rises up from the stone. We have a letter from Frederick Law Olmsted to Richardson expressing his satisfaction with the site. This is interesting because it tells us just how closely the two work together in putting a building and a site together. Most visitors to Easton are quite surprised when they come into a New England village and find a French castle at the end of Main Street. This can probably be explained by Richardson's early education. He studied over in the famous Academy of Beaux-Arts in Paris at the time of the Civil War. He took several trips to the south of France where he visited the Roman ruins, and his sketchbooks are full of sketches of old Roman arches. From this we can see that he, in his later life, carried his interest in the Roman architecture into his commissions. Also, Oakes, and not many people know who Oakes was, but Oakes was someone who was very instrumental and perhaps critical in the building of the Transcontinental Railroad back in the 1860s. And as such, perhaps deserving of a monumental building. But again, one is struck when you come into Easton that this is not exactly a white clapboard meeting house by the village green. And in fact, there was a proposal for a wooden structure. When the original design of Richardson was proposed, some people, and we assume it wasn't all, objected to the design and instead wanted a more traditional white clapboard building. And so you can see it's not always unanimity of opinion on design. Collaboration of Richardson and Olmsted, mentioned earlier, really works very well here. And you can see that both of them were of the same philosophy for design. They appreciated the natural setting, the use of natural materials in a very organic sense. Another good example in Easton, which I hope you'll see, is the Gate Lodge on Elm Street. Part of what I think is the great appeal of this building is, again, the collaboration between Richardson and Olmsted. The building seems to suit the site very well. It grows out of the rock outcropping, and the building complements the site. As you can see, the building is dramatically sited. Its monumentality really speaks of Oaks Ames and his accomplishments with the Transcontinental Railroad. Compare it to the library, the more sedate, classical, well-balanced, reserved building, which was built in honor of his older brother, Oliver, the one who stayed in Easton and minded the shops. Inside the building, there are, on the first floor, two smaller rooms with a kitchen to the back. At the upstairs, or second level, is a large, high-ceiling meeting hall where many events take place. On the third floor, which is currently inaccessible because the fire escape is gone, is the Masonic Room. The Masonic Room was built by the architect H.H. Richardson, who was himself a Mason. The first place to stop when you enter this building is right here at the loggia. Take a look at the animal carvings on each of the columns. Also, notice the arches themselves. When you look down this loggia, you really get that sense of what it must have been like for Richardson looking at those old Roman ruins in the south of France in the 1800s. You really get a feeling of being in a monastery. And now, it's time for us to go look at the inside. In the 19th century, it was common for architects to not only design the buildings, of course, but also the furniture that went with them. This bench that I am seated on right now is the only piece of Richardson furniture that we have in the hall, and ironically, this was a piece of furniture that was built for the Gate Lodge. And at one point, there were a number of chairs that were designed specifically for this building. I heard one person say they saw one in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. We haven't followed up on that. But needless to say, we do not have any of the original furniture in the hall. We are in Hall B on the first level of the hall. This is the most used room and is very popular for small parties. In the late 1980s, the trustees renovated this room to get it back to its original condition.
This room is named in honor of Eleanor Ames. She was the first president of the Oaks Ames Memorial Hall Development Association. The Development Association was formed at the urging of Blanche Ames and was responsible for saving the hall from neglect. Eleanor also hosted the first colloquium of Richardson scholars in 1968.
Now let's go to the second level. Be sure to notice on your way up the difference between Olmsted's grand staircase on the outside and Richardson's more humbler staircase on the inside. Stairways to Richardson often seem to be an afterthought. He was forever tucking them in towers or in corners. The next time you're in Boston, take a look at Trinity Church and notice where he puts the stairs there. Richardson saved the grand staircase in this design for the third floor, but it was never built. So let's go up to the second floor. And this, of course, is Hall A. The most prominent feature is this painting. This bit of stage art comes to Easton by way of Broadway. Winthrop Ames, a grandson of Oaks Ames and a producer of plays on Broadway, gave this large painting to the hall in the 1930s. It is a copy of an 1852 painting by Jean-Louis Amand called The Human Comedy. The idea behind the painting, which was inspired by the artist's reading of Dante, is the play of life. In the audience are the great men of literature watching a puppet show. The puppet show, or the play of life, shows Eros, or lust, being hanged, and Bacchus, or wild indulgence, being thrashed. The idea behind the painting is that for a person to gain wisdom, a young person must first overcome lust, and the old person must overcome a lust for power. In the painting are some of the greats of classical literature: Homer, Dante, and Socrates. Sheep Pasture was the childhood home of Mrs. Parker. Towards the end of her life, it was her vision to leave this as a conservation area to be enjoyed by the people of Easton, specifically teaching children about the importance of the environment. When she died in 1979, Mrs. Parker left $800,000 and the land for the NRT. This was a dream fulfilled for her. We are also lucky that she expressed a concern in the welfare of this building. In her will, she left $200,000 to be used for the maintenance of the hall. This was put to good use in 1981 with a completely new roof and other major repairs. Windows in the large hall upstairs are of particular interest in that they show a color scheme that we don't see anywhere else. The original colors of the walls are no longer available to us. Just as the Masonic ceiling in the third floor gives us paint information, so do these colored windows give us some idea of what might be appropriate colors were we to try and get the walls back to a more accurate historic covering. Grand staircase that Richardson never built. It was to be built for the mason's room on the third floor. This is a room with painted ceiling, waiting rooms, and raised, well, should we call them altars? I don't know. But Richardson was a mason, and this was designed, and it was used for a number of years as a Masonic hall. Well, as you already know, Richardson's grand staircase was never built, and you were probably asking yourself, how are we going to show you something that was never built? Well, what does remain is the Masonic room itself, and the ceiling, which we'll see in a moment, is the original ceiling. The walls themselves were repainted sometime in the 1950s. The grand staircase would be coming up right here to your left for a grand entrance into the Masonic chamber. Again, this room currently does not have any use, nor is it accessible by fire escape. But it is a remarkable room in that it speaks directly to Richardson the man. Well, I guess you're probably wondering where we are now. Needless to say, if this was the 1950s up here, we would be surrounded with pigeons, bats, and who knows what. This is the attic of the hall, and it's a very interesting spot, I think. What I have here in my hand is, for those of you who really know the hall, know that at one time there were several windows halfway up in the roof which were not put back when the new roof was put on, or some roof repairs were done in the 1950s. Dormer windows, which these were, tended to leak, and it was causing quite a bit of roof damage, so they were taken out. One of our projects is we would like to put these windows back. We have them here. They can be remade, and as you look around, you can see where the windows were before that have been since boarded up. Right now we're standing directly above the grate in the Masonic room, which was used for ventilation in the gaslight day, because that certainly was a problem then with pollution, air pollution from the gas fumes. And just when you thought you couldn't get any higher up in the Oaks Ames Hall, we're going to take you up a few more feet and look out the northern roof over to Unity Church. It's a very nice view. And again, here is the view looking north from the hall. And this is a preview of the upcoming feature, the rooftops of Easton. I had the good fortune back in 1981 when they were redoing the roof on this building to be able to go with the roofers right up to the top peak of the roof, which is about another 15 feet higher. And the view was spectacular if you could stop shaking long enough to enjoy it. In addition to historical discussions, such as the recent colloquium, We also plan to sponsor events that will deal with restoration issues, such as the deterioration of brownstone. This is a problem in this building, and we hope that by sponsoring a workshop on it this year, we'll be able to come up with what we hope is a solution to a very serious problem this building has. This building also, I think, in a way, is a monument to volunteer effort. Over the years, there have been many, many people who've put in their efforts, their ideas, and their work. And I think as residents of Easton, we should be proud of this building and all that it stands for. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Ames. I'm on the board of the Ames Free Library, Easton's public library. We're here today on a sunny afternoon in the end of May to give you a guided tour of the library. Joining me today is my mother, Mrs. David Ames.
And I'm Elizabeth Ames, and I was on the library board for a great many years as the secretary, and I'm just here because I'm the oldest living member of the library to tell you maybe a few little nuggets of information or jokes or something, stories from the old days that might be of interest.
So, Mom, what was your first job as the
Well,
trustee?
one of the early things I did, there was a problem with the librarian sitting out there at the librarian's desk, and she was not really able to keep a good eye on some of the students and the activities that went on in the reading room, because children used to study in here, and there would be a certain amount of noise and disruption and things going on. And in those days, still, libraries were run as a fairly taut ship, and you weren't supposed to talk too loudly and make a lot of noise. But after in the evenings, particularly when they studied, it got a little rowdy sometimes, and she could never control it without leaving the desk. And then if she had to leave the desk and somebody came up to borrow a book, that was difficult also. So I was given the responsibility of dealing with this problem. And the way ultimately it was settled was that one day I was in Boston at Bonwit Teller buying a hat, and they used to, in those days everybody wore hats, and this was just a sort of, it was a hat bar, so-called. They had those little cheap hats on there. Anybody could come and pick one up and try it on and see how it looked. And over the top of the counter was a mirror, I keep my hand out, was a mirror that you looked in, and it was just exactly like that mirror over there. And I remember thinking to myself when I was trying on a hat one day, well, this is perfect because you can see what's going on obviously behind you. So we got a piece of glass, a small piece, and tried it, and it worked out very well. So we ordered a full size, and that's how that mirror over the top of the doorway out there in the front hall area, vestibule, got installed. And it was the first thing that was put in the library that wasn't really of the period, H.H. Richardson, and that was really, you know, well, it wasn't really quite a step, but it was the first step of anything modern and different. And I think it was very satisfactory because Miss Poirier could sit there, and the children never could figure out at first how she possibly knew what they were up to. So, and they caught on, but even so, she could fix them with a beady eye, and they'd quiet right down.
So Mrs. Frothingham was the president, and when you did this
yes,
task at that
yeah,
point.
right. She took an enormous interest in the library.
Now, what was she? She was my father, your husband's aunt, correct?
Yes, and she was a daughter of Frederick L. Ames, wasn't she?
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Who was the one, as you said, implemented the will of his father, Oliver Ames, and oversaw the construction of the library.
This fireplace was designed by Stanford White, who was a New York architect, and he collaborated with Richardson, or embellished many of Richardson's buildings. You can see it's the sort of an ornate, there are pineapples in the middle, and oak, leaves, and different other sort of iconography, I guess the term is. And then in the middle up there is a bas-relief of the donor of the money, Oliver Ames Jr.
Beneath the reference room, in the cellar, is a storage area containing artifacts dating back to the years when the library was being constructed. One of the treasures is the plaster cast of Oliver Ames, created by St. Gordon's, from which the bronze over the fireplace was cast. Safely stored in a large wooden crate, it is placed on view for the public only on special occasions. We hope to incorporate this artistic gem into the interior decor of the new addition, thus providing a symbol of continuity. Section here is where you see the archway. That is the entrance to the library. Interestingly, you will notice that it is placed off to the right and not at the center. One would perhaps expect an arch to be placed in the center. Certainly in the Oaks Ames Hall you have a very symmetrical set of arches. Here it is low slung, and as one architectural critic has described, the exterior of this building has a tough Romanesque look. Here we are up in the pigeon guano-infested tower room of the library. This is sort of, I think, a little evocative of Richardson's Romanesque style, in that it has a tower that goes up in the cities of Siena and Abruzzi. They have towers very similar to this. You can see up to the south of us here on the upside of the hill is the Oaks Ames Hall. This is the face that's been exposed since we took it upon ourselves to get the pine trees out of there several years ago. Then around. Here we are in the back side of the library. You can see behind me, there is the children's wing, built in 1931, as we discussed, the Shepley Bullfinch design, which I think blends quite well with the existing building and the roof lines, yet retains its own individuality. There are many examples from this view of gargoyles, very interesting gargoyles. You can see I believe it's a pineapple up on the top, as well as one over there. Maybe that's a guava lemon, or I don't know what it is, but Richardson was famous for his gargoyles, and he certainly used them to the fullest extent here. Right there, of course, that's the barrel vault room where most of the adult collection is stored. There's two levels to it. You can see the second story there. Those are the window bays on the top floor. Beneath them are study bays on the main floor. In the distance over there, through the trees, you can see Queesit House, which was the A.J. Davis rendition of a Downing design, built for Oaks Ainger Ames, and was lived in by his son Winthrop Ames years after his death. Winthrop Ames was a loyal patron of the library. He would have in the garden, which is just to the left, straight ahead of me now, he would have elaborate garden parties, nowadays referred to as Shakespeare Glen. Broadway actors such as Catherine Cornell and George Arliss would come up, and they would put on plays, and children or students from the high school would come down. They'd be the chorus, for example, in Midsummer Night's Dream. The author John P. Marquand was a frequent visitor out here in those days, and my father remembers sitting and having martinis with Marquand and Winthrop Ames after church on Sunday. Winthrop Ames felt that my grandfather was a little stiff, and so he liked to get his children a few martinis in them and send them home for Sunday lunch, liven the place up, which everyone thought was not a big success, but Dad enjoyed it.
But in 1930, the big thing did happen, you're absolutely right, was the addition of the children's wing, which was given by Mrs. William H. Ames in memory of her husband.
building directly ahead of me there I'm pointing to is where most of the books are stored for the adult reading collection. When the library was first opened, there were no novels. Novels considered to be a diversion, a waste of diversion away from making shovels, undoubtedly. So they were categorized in other sections, somewhat clandestinely put in the stacks, I'm afraid. Of all the rooms in the library, the wing that houses the adult fiction and nonfiction collection is generally considered to be Richardson's single most stunning accomplishment in all his Northeastern commissions. At the south end of the room, the marble bust of the donor, Oliver Ames Jr., stares out at patrons with a stern visage, characteristic of New England's early settlers, long accustomed to enduring the hardships of creating a new and free society. Wrapping around the room is a classic Romanesque balcony with its delicately carved butterwood supports that create a certain lightness of being for what appears above it, the ceiling. The ceiling, made of applewood staves, gives the room its name, the Barrel Vault Room. The vault-like curvature of the wooden staves in the ceiling resembles that of the interior of a barrel, and is not only considered a remarkable design, but also is well suited to absorb the sounds in the room, and thus enhances its silence for reading. To others, the arching of the ceiling is reminiscent of a view of the interior of the hull of a wooden boat, and here the metaphor is the self-contained entity contentedly afloat on the seas of uncertain fate. Either way, the decidedly feminine delicacy and finesse of the wooden interior contrasts effectively with the quite masculine heavy stone exterior. Richardson's approach to the design of the ceiling of the reading room is also seen in other of his libraries, such as the library in Malden. But his original design here in Northeastern is frequently called his most appealing, of modest size, with a sense of intimacy that enhances the purpose of the room for browsing and reading, far from the madding crowd. Today, however, the bays and the floor are the only remaining places to read. But after the impending renovation program is completed, the center stacks will be taken out and replaced with large oak tables and comfortable chairs for reading, or just dozing while reading the newspaper on a late fall afternoon. A rug will cover the floor, and altogether the room will once again take on the feeling of a reading room in an ancient university library in a corner of Europe. Build thee more stately mansions, O my soul, as the swift seasons roll, leave thy two-vaulted past. Let each new temple, nobler than the last, set thee from heaven with a dome more vast, till thou at length art free, leaving thine outgrown shell by life's unresting sea. Oliver Wendell Holmes, Boston, 1889.
My husband David was very active on the board for a great many years, and subsequently was the president for 30-odd years, and he was on the board for, I think, 44 years.
He succeeded Mrs. Frothingham as the president, I think it was 1957.
He became the president, and I was put on the board.